You check your bank account. Your chest tightens. You close the app. 3 hours later, you check again. Nothing changed. But you feel worse. This isn't about being broke. People with 6 figures in savings do this too. The number doesn't matter. The feeling does. And here's what nobody tells you. Money stress isn't actually about money. It's about control, or the illusion of it, and your brain is running a program you didn't install. Right now, as you're watching this, your nervous system is making financial decisions for you, not your logic, not your spreadsheets, your biology. And it's probably sabotaging you. By the way, I'm Ben, and you're watching Ben Invest, where I explain financial decisions and secrets. Let's continue. 1. To set up money stress is the most democratic form of suffering in modern life. It doesn't care about your income bracket. A person making $40,000 a year loses sleep over bills. A person making $400,000 loses sleep over whether they're investing correctly. Different numbers, same cortisol. The American Psychological Association runs this survey every year. For the past decade, money has ranked as the #1 source of stress in America. Not health, not relationships, money. 72% of adults report feeling stressed about money at least some of the time. But here's the part that should bother you. 64% of those people say they felt stressed about money within the last month. Not during a recession, not during a crisis, just a regular month. And here's where it gets strange. When researchers dig deeper, they find something uncomfortable. The stress doesn't correlate neatly with actual financial hardship. Yes, people struggling to pay rent are stressed, obviously, but so are people with healthy emergency funds. So are people who objectively have enough. So what's happening? Your brain evolved in an environment where resources were scarce and threats were immediate. A lion, a rival tribe, a bad winter. The stress response made sense. It kept you alive. But your brain hasn't updated its software. It's still running a program designed for the savannah, and it's trying to apply that program to a checking account balance. When you see a low number, or an unexpected bill, or a market downturn, your amygdala lights up. This is the ancient part of your brain. It doesn't do nuance. It doesn't understand diversified portfolios or credit scores. It just knows danger. And it floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline. This is called the scarcity mindset, and it does something brutal. It narrows your focus. Researchers at Princeton and Harvard demonstrated this with a famous study. They gave people cognitive tests, simple stuff, pattern recognition, logic puzzles. But before the test, they told half the participants to imagine they needed to pay for an unexpected car repair. $1,500. That's it. Just imagine it. The group that imagined the expense performed significantly worse on the tests. Their IQ effectively dropped, not because they were dumb, because their brain's processing power was being diverted. Worrying about money literally makes you less intelligent in the moment. And if you're constantly worrying about money, you're constantly operating below your cognitive capacity. This is the trap. Money stress makes you worse at managing money, which creates more money stress, which makes you worse at managing money. A loop. Let's break down what's actually happening in your body when financial stress hits. You open a credit card bill. It's higher than you expected. Immediately, your hypothalamus signals your pituitary gland. The pituitary releases a hormone that tells your adrenal glands to dump cortisol into your bloodstream. This happens in seconds. You don't choose it. You don't control it. It's automatic. Cortisol is useful if you need to run from a predator. It sharpens certain functions, increases glucose in your bloodstream, heightens your senses. But it also shuts down functions that aren't immediately necessary for survival, like rational long-term planning, like impulse control. Here's the cruelty. The thing you need most when managing money is the thing stress destroys first. Patience. Perspective. The ability to delay gratification. A study from the University of California tracked people's financial decisions while measuring their cortisol levels. High cortisol correlated with riskier choices, not calculated risks. Desperate ones. Payday loans, high-interest credit cards, get-rich-quick schemes. When people are stressed about money, they make decisions that perpetuate the stress, and it compounds. Chronic financial stress doesn't just spike your cortisol once. It keeps it elevated. Weeks, months, years. This has measurable effects. Worse sleep, higher blood pressure, weakened immune system, increased risk of heart disease. Depression, anxiety. The National Institutes of Health published a longitudinal study following people over 20 years. Those who reported chronic financial stress had a 32% higher mortality rate. Even after controlling for actual income and wealth, the stress itself was killing people, not the poverty. The worry. Now, here's where it gets complicated, because the obvious answer is just make more money, right? Solve the problem at the source. But that's not how it works. There's this concept called the hedonic treadmill. As your income increases, your lifestyle adjusts to match it. You make $50,000, you spend $48,000. You make $100,000, you spend $96,000. The gap stays the same. The stress stays the same, just with nicer furniture. A survey by SunTrust Bank found that 1 in 3 Americans earning $75,000 or more live paycheck to paycheck. These aren't people in poverty. These are solidly middle-class households, and they feel just as financially precarious as someone making $30,000 because they've scaled their expenses to match their income, so more money doesn't fix it, at least not automatically. What does? The comfortable truth. The relief from money stress doesn't come from having more money. It comes from changing your relationship with uncertainty. This sounds like self-help nonsense, but stay with me, because there's actual neuroscience here. Your brain craves certainty. It wants to know what's coming. When you don't know, when things feel unpredictable, your amygdala interprets that as threat, and money is inherently uncertain. Markets fluctuate. Jobs end. Expenses surprise you. There's no amount of money that eliminates uncertainty. Even billionaires don't have certainty. They just have bigger buffers. So the question becomes, how do you train your brain to tolerate financial uncertainty without triggering a full stress response? First thing, and this will sound too simple, but it's backed by an absurd amount of research. You need to externalize the information. Get it out of your head. A study from Texas A&M had people write down their financial worries for 15 minutes a day, just stream of consciousness. Bills, debts, fears, whatever was spinning in their minds. After 2 weeks, participants reported a significant decrease in financial anxiety, not because their financial situation changed. It didn't. But because the act of writing it down reduced the cognitive load. Their brain didn't have to keep rehearsing the information, trying not to forget it. Think of your brain like RAM on a computer. If you've got 20 tabs open, everything slows down. Financial worries are tabs. Close them by writing them down. Put them somewhere external. A notebook, a spreadsheet, an app. Doesn't matter. The act of externalizing frees up processing power. Second, you need to separate your identity from your net worth. This is harder than it sounds, because capitalism is very good at teaching you that your value as a person is tied to your economic output. How much you make, what you own, where you live. These become proxies for self-worth. And when your finances fluctuate, your sense of self fluctuates with it. Psychologists call this financial identity threat, and it's particularly brutal because it's invisible. You don't realize you're doing it, but when your income drops or your investments tank, you feel it as a personal failure, not just a circumstantial setback. A failure of you. Researchers at Northwestern ran an experiment. They had people reflect on their core values, things unrelated to money, family, creativity, kindness, whatever mattered to them personally. Then they showed these people their financial information, bank balances, debt, the works. Compared to a control group, the people who did the values exercise showed significantly lower stress responses. Same financial information. Different framing. What this suggests is that money stress isn't actually about the money. It's about what the money represents. Security, status, control. If you can anchor your identity to something other than your financial situation, the fluctuations hurt less. Third, automate everything you can. This seems tactical, but it's deeply psychological. Every financial decision you have to make manually is a moment of stress. Should I pay this bill now or later? Should I transfer money to savings? Should I invest this month? Each decision depletes your willpower. Each one activates that stress response. A study from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that people who automated their savings saved significantly more than people who manually transferred money. Not because they earned more, because automation removed the decision. The money moved without requiring willpower. And willpower, it turns out, is a finite resource. If you automate bill payments, savings transfers, investment contributions, you shrink the surface area for stress. There are fewer moments where you have to engage with uncertainty. Your brain learns this is handled. I don't have to monitor it constantly. But here's the part that nobody likes. These tactics help, but they don't solve the underlying issue because the underlying issue is structural. You're not stressed about money because you're bad at managing it. You're stressed because the system is designed to keep you stressed. Think about how debt works in this country. Student loans, medical debt, credit cards. The average American household carries over $90,000 in debt. This isn't an accident. This isn't because people are irresponsible. This is by design. Lenders make more money when you're stressed, when you're desperate, when you need access to credit and can't afford to be picky about terms. A calm, financially secure person doesn't take out a payday loan at 400% APR. A stressed person does. The entire consumer credit industry is built on predicting and exploiting financial stress. Credit scores are literally a measure of how reliably you'll stay in debt without defaulting, not whether you're good with money. Whether you're profitable to lend to. And then there's the larger economy. Wages have stagnated for 40 years. The cost of housing, education, and healthcare has exploded. The gap between productivity and compensation is wider than it's ever been. You're producing more value for your employer than ever before in history, and you're getting a smaller share of it. So when you feel stressed about money, part of that is you. Your psychology, your habits, but part of it is a rational response to a system that's actively working against you. Here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. You can't de-stress your way out of systemic inequality. You can meditate, you can budget, you can automate, and those things help. They genuinely do, but they don't change the fact that the deck is stacked. A report from the Federal Reserve found that 54% of Americans couldn't cover an unexpected $1,000 expense without going into debt. That's not a personal finance problem. That's a structural problem, and no amount of individual optimization fixes it. So what do? If individual tactics help but don't solve it, and the system won't change in time to help you, what's the move? You have to operate on two levels simultaneously, micro and macro. On the micro level, you do the boring, unglamorous work. You externalize your financial information so it's not eating up cognitive bandwidth. You automate what you can to reduce decision fatigue. You build small buffers even if it's just $200 because research shows that even tiny emergency funds reduce stress disproportionately. The psychological relief of knowing you have something is massive, even if objectively it's not much. You also, and this is critical, you set boundaries with yourself around checking your accounts. This sounds small, but it's not. Every time you check your bank balance, you're creating an opportunity for a stress response. If you're checking 5 times a day, you're spiking your cortisol 5 times a day. For no reason. The number doesn't change because you looked at it. Financial therapist Megan McCoy did research on this. She found that people who checked their accounts obsessively reported higher financial stress, even when their financial situation was stable. The checking itself was the stressor. She recommends setting specific times, once a week, same day, same time. You look, you know what's happening, you move on. The rest of the week, the app stays closed. On the macro level, you have to engage with the structural issues, and this is where people tune out because it feels too big, too abstract. What are you supposed to do about wage stagnation or healthcare costs? You're just one person. But here's the thing, collective action is the only thing that's ever changed systems. Labor unions, consumer protection laws, financial regulations. None of that happened because individuals optimized their personal budgets. It happened because people organized and demanded change. You don't have to become an activist, but you can vote for policies that address economic inequality. You can support unions. You can push your employer for better pay or benefits. You can talk openly about money with friends and colleagues because financial shame only benefits the people profiting from your stress. This isn't motivational. This is practical. The stress you feel about money is partly personal and partly political. You need strategies for both. Now here's the paradox that sits at the center of all of this. The thing that makes money stress so intractable. Money is a proxy. It's a tool. It has no intrinsic value. A dollar bill is just paper. A bank balance is just numbers on a screen. We all know this intellectually. But emotionally, we treat money like it's the thing itself. Security, freedom, worth. And that confusion is where the stress lives. You're not actually afraid of a low bank balance. You're afraid of what it represents. Losing your home, not being able to care for your family, being seen as a failure. Those fears are real. They're valid. But they're not the same thing as the money itself. Buddhist economics, which sounds ridiculous, but bear with me, there's a concept called right livelihood. The idea is that you should earn money in a way that doesn't harm yourself or others. But more than that, you should understand that money is a means, not an end. The end is a good life, whatever that means to you. Western capitalism inverted this. It made money the end, the goal, and everything else, including your well-being, became the means to get it. So you sacrifice sleep to work more, you sacrifice relationships to earn more, you sacrifice peace of mind to accumulate more. And then you're stressed because the accumulation never feels like enough. Because it's not, you're chasing an abstraction. The relief from money stress requires you to flip it back, to remember that money is a tool for living, not the point of living. And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because once you internalize that, you have to confront your actual priorities. What do you actually need money for? Not in theory, not based on what society tells you, based on the life you actually want to live. For some people, that's minimalism, radically reducing expenses so they can work less and have more time. For others, it's maximalism, earning as much as possible to fund specific experiences or goals. There's no right answer, but there is a wrong answer, and the wrong answer is not knowing, just drifting, accumulating because that's what you're supposed to do, stressing because the accumulation never feels sufficient. A study from Princeton found that money increases happiness up to a point, about $75,000 a year in annual income back in 2010. Adjusted for inflation, that's closer to $100,000 now. But here's what matters. Beyond that threshold, more money doesn't correlate with more happiness. It correlates with more stress. Because once you've covered your basic needs, every additional dollar isn't buying you security, it's buying you complexity. More to manage, more to worry about, more to protect. This doesn't mean earning more is bad, but it does mean that if you're pursuing more money to reduce stress, you need to be aware that above a certain threshold, it might do the opposite. Be honest about something. Some amount of money stress is unsolvable. If you're living in poverty, if you genuinely don't have enough to cover basic needs, no psychological trick is going to fix that. The stress is rational. It's a response to real danger. And the answer is in mindfulness. It's more money. But for everyone else, for the vast majority of people watching this who have enough but don't feel like they have enough, the stress is negotiable. Not eliminable, but negotiable. You're never going to feel completely certain about money because money exists in the future and the future is uncertain. Markets will crash, jobs will end, expenses will surprise you. That's not a bug, that's reality. The question is, can you tolerate that uncertainty without it consuming you? And here's the trick. The tolerance doesn't come from having more. It comes from accepting that more won't solve it. Once you stop believing that the next raise or the next investment win will finally make you feel secure, the chase loses its power. You can still pursue financial goals, but you're not doing it from a place of fear. You're doing it from a place of choice. There's a term in psychology, locus of control. It refers to whether you believe you control your outcomes or external forces do. People with an internal locus of control, who believe they have agency, report lower stress and better mental health, even when their circumstances are objectively difficult. But here's the nuance. An internal locus of control isn't about believing you control everything. That's delusion. It's about believing you control your response to things. You can't control the market. You can control whether you check your portfolio every hour. You can't control your salary. You can control your spending. You can't control the economy. You can control how you frame your relationship to it. This isn't empowerment rhetoric. This is damage control, because the alternative is learned helplessness. The belief that nothing you do matters, and that belief is corrosive. It breeds passivity, and passivity in the face of financial stress just deepens it. Closing. So here's where we land. Money stress is a hybrid problem. Part psychological, part structural. You can't think your way out of systemic inequality, but you can't policy your way out of cognitive bias either. You need both. On the personal level, you externalize information, automate decisions, build small buffers, and set boundaries around financial checking. You work to separate your identity from your net worth. You clarify what you actually need money for, beyond the abstract idea of having more. On the structural level, you recognize that the system profits from your stress, and you push back where you can. Vote, organize, demand better, not because it's easy, because it's necessary. And in the space between those two, you practice something uncomfortable. You practice sitting with uncertainty, not eliminating it, sitting with it. Because certainty is a lie. Nobody has it. Not the billionaires, not the gurus, nobody. The relief from money stress doesn't come from finally having enough. It comes from realizing that enough is a moving target and the chase itself is optional. You can still want more, but you don't have to need it. And that gap between wanting and needing, that's where the stress lives, and that's where the relief lives too. So the next time you check your bank account and your chest tightens, pause. Ask yourself, what am I actually afraid of right now? Not the number, the thing beneath the number. Name it, write it down, separate the fear from the fact, because most of the time, the fear is worse than the fact, and if the fact is actually bad, if you're in real trouble, then you deal with it. Not from panic, from clarity, because panic makes you worse at solving problems. And you need to be sharp. Money stress will probably never go away completely. Not in the system. Not in this life. But it doesn't have to run you. It doesn't have to make your decisions. It doesn't have to define your days. You're smarter than your amygdala. You're bigger than your bank balance. And the relief you're looking for isn't in the next paycheck. It's in remembering that.